My MIL pushed me because I refused to name my baby after her. I never expected the tension over a baby name to turn into something life-altering, but that night at my mother-in-law's house changed everything. I was 7 months pregnant, standing at the top of her long staircase, already exhausted from the family gathering she insisted on hosting. Diane had been circling me all evening like a hawk waiting for an opening, tossing out comments about the baby, as if she were testing different pieces of bait. When she finally cornered me, her tone was sharp enough to slice through whatever patience I had left. So, are you ready to tell me what you've decided to name my granddaughter, or should I keep waiting for you to come to your senses? I knew she wouldn't like the truth, which was why I'd been dodging her all night, pretending to need water or pretending to hear someone calling me from across the room. But there was no escaping her now. Blake, and I had already chosen the name Rose, after the grandmother who raised me when my parents' marriage was collapsing. The name meant safety, strength, and belonging to me. When I finally said it out loud, Diane repeated it slowly, stretching the syllable as if the word tasted sour to her. Rose, not Diane. I explained gently, hoping she'd understand, but she didn't let me finish. Instead, she launched into a speech about her sacrifices, about carrying Blake for 9 months, about raising him alone when his father left, about giving up everything for him. According to her, the least I could do to honor all that was give her a grandchild with her name. I told her it wasn't personal, and that we simply wanted to honor someone who shaped who I am, but she acted like I'd spit in her face. She grew more agitated with every sentence, convincing herself that I was trying to erase her from Blake's life. When I asked if we could talk about it later, she exploded. Calm down. You're in my home, telling me I'm not good enough to be remembered through your child, and you want me to calm down? She stepped closer, and I backed away, but all that waited behind me was the staircase. She kept accusing me of trying to push her out, of wanting to take her son away, of wanting to pretend she didn't exist. I tried to reassure her, but she didn't want reassurance. She wanted control. Then she said, "Prove you care. Change the name." When I said I couldn't do that, something shut off behind her eyes. It was a coldness I had never seen in her before. Wrong answer. Her hand shot out fast, and she pushed me hard. For a second, I didn't understand what was happening, only that the world tilted and the floor disappeared. My body reacted quicker than my mind, curling protectively around my belly as I tumbled down the steps, slamming into each one. By the time I hit the bottom, the breath had been knocked out of me and everything hurt. When I looked up, Diane still stood at the top, her arm extended, her expression frozen. For half a heartbeat, I saw its satisfaction. She had done exactly what she intended. Then it vanished behind a mask of horror as she rushed down the stairs, sobbing loudly for everyone to hear. She slipped. Oh my God, she slipped. I tried to grab her. People crowded around me, and someone called 911. Blake shoved through the group, falling to his knees beside me, panic etched across his face. But Diane hovered right behind him, performing grief and fear like she'd rehearsed it. I couldn't take her act anymore. She pushed me, I told Blake. She pushed me. Everything in the room froze. Diane gasped dramatically, clinging to Blake's arm, insisting I was confused, that I hit my head, that I didn't know what I was saying. Blake looked torn, caught between the woman who raised him and the woman carrying his child. At the hospital, after hours of tests, we learned the baby was okay. I cried with relief. Blake did too. But when I told him again that his mother had pushed me, doubt clouded his face. He said I was traumatized, that maybe I misinterpreted her reaching for me as a push. He needed a version of events that didn't shatter the image he held of his mother. And in my exhaustion, with pain radiating through my hip and monitors beeping around me, I didn't have the strength to fight him. So I let him believe a softer lie. But deep down, I replayed the moment over and over, her cold eyes, her hand on my chest, the final shove, and I knew the truth. I also knew that by morning, Diane would be rewriting the events for the rest of the family, turning herself into the victim, and me into the unstable one. I had a small window to act before her version became the narrative everyone believed. I just didn't know then how far Diane would go to protect that lie, or how determined she was to paint me as a danger to my own baby. I only knew that if I didn't fight back, she'd rewrite my life in a way I wouldn't recognize. But what I didn't realize yet was that the fall was only the beginning. Diane was just getting started. Diane's version of the story spread faster than I could have imagined. By the next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from Blake's relatives, most of whom I'd only met a couple of times at best. They weren't asking how I was feeling or expressing outrage at what happened. Instead, they were offering soft condolences wrapped in suspicion, asking if I was doing better after my emotional fall. One cousin hoped I was getting the help I needed. Another said Diane had been up all night, crying about how scared she was for both me and the baby. None of them mentioned Diane pushing me. None of them asked what really happened. Diane had moved quickly, calling people one by one, planting seeds that painted her as the heartbroken protector and me as unstable. It was a script she had perfected long before I ever entered her life. When I called Blake's aunt to hear exactly what Diane said, the woman spoke to me like she was handling a fragile child. She told me I'd been hormonal and erratic, and that poor Diane was devastated that I'd accused her of something so horrible. According to her, Diane was terrified I wasn't mentally fit to be a mother. The words hit like ice water. Diane wasn't just covering her tracks. She was setting up a narrative, one that positioned her as the sane, concerned guardian, and me as the unbalanced threat. The moment I hung up, I called my sister Val. If there was anyone who wouldn't fall for Diane's theatrics, it was her. When I finished explaining everything, Val didn't hesitate. Screenshot everything. Record every conversation. She's not going to stop. She's building something, and you need proof. I didn't understand how much worse things could get, but Val did. She'd always been sharper than me when it came to reading people's motives, and Diane's motives were becoming clearer by the hour. That night, when Blake came home, I confronted him. I told him everything his mother had been saying, how she was spinning a story about my mental state. Blake sighed, exhausted, and said he'd already spoken to her. She's really hurt by all this. Hurt. That word made my jaw clench. A woman who pushed her pregnant daughter-in-law down a staircase was now weaponizing her own crocodile tears. I pressed him, asking what exactly Diane had told him. He sat across from me with softened features, explaining how she'd opened up about her childhood, about being abandoned by her own mother, about growing up feeling invisible until Blake was born. She told him naming the baby Diane would make her feel like she finally mattered. I felt sick. Diane wasn't defending herself. She was manipulating him, pulling at the emotional threads she'd woven through his entire life. When I asked if she mentioned the push, Blake said she insisted she didn't do it. He believed she made mistakes, but not that she could be violent. He said admitting that would mean his entire understanding of her was a lie. And that was the truth he couldn't face. Diane had crafted her identity as the tragic, self-sacrificing mother for 32 years. She depended on Blake needing her. I wasn't just challenging her version of a story. I was threatening her entire persona. Blake's refusal to see what happened left me cold. She's telling people I'm mentally unfit to be a mother, I said. He tried to defend her again, saying she was scared she'd lose him. He was so deep in her web that he genuinely believed she was the one hurting. By the time he grabbed his keys and walked out, I knew something inside our marriage had shifted. Diane thought I would cave, that I'd let her rewrite what happened. She thought I'd protect Blake's feelings instead of protecting myself. But she didn't understand that falling down those stairs wiped away the last piece of fear I had of her disapproval. I wasn't fighting her as a wife anymore. I was fighting her as a mother. And I was going to find the truth, even if I had to dig it out of the people too afraid to cross her. The next morning, I started making calls. Blake's cousin Jan was the only one who hadn't reached out with rehearsed sympathy, which made me think she might actually tell the truth. When she answered, she didn't even hesitate. I was wondering when you'd reach out, she said. Her voice sounded tired, like someone who'd seen too much of Diane's damage. I asked if anyone saw what happened. Jan said she hadn't seen the push itself, which made my heart sink, but then she added something that made me sit up. I didn't see her hand, but I saw her face. Right before you fell. She didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied, like that was exactly what she meant to happen. Relief washed through me in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't crazy. Jan had seen the same expression I had, the flash of triumph before Diane slipped back into her mask. But then Jan told me something that chilled me more than the fall itself. When she was 16, Diane accused her of stealing $200 from her purse at a family barbecue. Jan didn't take it, but Diane cried and shook and convinced everyone she did. Jan was grounded all summer and forced to pay her back. Jan said Diane had a pattern. She decided something happened, and then she made everyone believe it. And once Diane believed her own lie, nothing could shake her from it. I realized then what I was up against. Diane wasn't someone who simply made mistakes or acted out of emotion. She was someone who rewrote reality and expected everyone to follow the script. When Blake came home, I showed him everything. Jan's messages, her story, her warning. And for the first time, something in Blake cracked. Not enough to fully break, but enough that fear slipped through. I thought that would be the end of it. But Diane had only begun sharpening her knives. Rehook. I had no idea the next phone call from her would be the one that changed everything and turned her lies into open threats. 2 days after Jan revealed what she'd seen, My phone rang while I was folding baby clothes. Diane's name glowed on the screen like a warning light. Against my better judgment, I answered. Maybe I thought she'd break down and confess. Maybe I thought she'd try to apologize. But Diane never called to apologize. She called to control. Her voice was colder than usual, stripped of the sweetness she used to lure people in. I know you've been talking to January. My grip tightened on the phone. She said you're trying to turn my own family against me. I'm trying to get people to see the truth, I told her. That set her off. The truth? The truth is that you fell and decided to blame me because you can't stand that Blake will always love me. She said it with the confidence of someone who believed her own lies. And then her tone shifted again, lower, darker. I know things about postpartum depression, Marie. I know how to describe the symptoms. I know exactly what CPS looks for when they get reports about unstable mothers. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm warning you, she replied. Keep digging around, keep trying to make me look dangerous, and I'll make sure you never get a moment alone with that baby. She sounded almost amused. I'll call every agency, every doctor, every hospital. I'll tell them all about your moods, your crying, your paranoia. Blake already told me everything. My stomach twisted, because I knew that part was true. Blake often vented to his mother the same way people vent to close friends. He never imagined she would weaponize his words. Diane chuckled softly. It paints quite a picture, doesn't it? When she hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time, feeling both terrified and furious. She had threatened to take my baby. She made the threat openly, intentionally, without fear. And she did it over the phone, where I couldn't record it. Diane knew exactly how to protect herself. 2 weeks passed with no calls and no surprise visits. The silence was suffocating. Every evening, Blake checked the mailbox before I did, as if he was afraid another letter would be waiting. I watched him more carefully now. Every time his phone buzzed, he flinched. Diane had shaken something inside him, too. At my baby shower, hosted by my family only, I kept glancing at the door, expecting her to storm in with a forced smile and a new accusation polished into a threat. She didn't show, but I couldn't relax. The absence of a predator doesn't mean you're safe. It just means she's stalking from somewhere else. 3 weeks later, I went to a routine OB appointment, but something felt wrong the moment I walked into the clinic. The receptionist, who usually greeted me warmly, wouldn't meet my eyes. A nurse gave me a sideways glance before pretending to busy herself. My heartbeat sped up. After the exam, which showed the baby was healthy, my doctor asked if she could speak to me privately. She shut the door gently, then sat across from me with a look I'd only ever seen doctors use when delivering bad news. We've received several calls over the last 2 weeks, she said carefully. Anonymous calls, though I suspected they weren't anonymous to Diane. They were asking about your mental health history. They asked if you'd shown signs of paranoia or instability. They suggested we should monitor you closely. It felt like the floor tilted beneath me. What did you tell them? I whispered. Nothing, she said firmly. We do not release patient information. But I think you need to know that the calls were detailed, too detailed to come from someone outside your family. I closed my eyes. Diane had started her campaign early. I asked the doctor to put a password on my file, making it impossible for anyone, even Blake or Diane, to get information without my approval. The doctor agreed and added that she was documenting the suspicious calls in my chart. That documentation would become crucial later. But at the time, all I could think about was the fact that Diane wasn't slowing down, she was escalating. 2 days after the doctor's appointment, my boss called me into her office. She looked uneasy. I got a strange call this morning, she said. Someone claiming to be a concerned friend asked if you've seemed erratic lately. They mentioned your pregnancy. They said someone should check on you. My stomach dropped. This was Diane's doing, her voice disguised, her paranoia sharpened into false concern. Did they give a name? I asked. No, but they insisted you might be unstable. I explained it was a family issue I was handling. She nodded, but I saw doubt behind her eyes. That's what Diane wanted. She didn't need people to fully believe her. She just needed them to question me. A few seeds of doubt could ruin everything in the right moment. When I told Val, she grew quiet. Then she told me she'd done some digging. She'd spoken to Blake's aunt, the same woman who initially texted me with concern. Diane had been calling her weekly, crying, saying I was having psychotic episodes. Worse, she'd asked the aunt if she'd be willing to act as a character witness if something happened. Those were her exact words. If something happens. I pulled off the road because I couldn't breathe. Diane wasn't only trying to make me look unstable. She was preparing for something, planning something, setting the stage. When Blake got home, I told him everything. Every call, every lie, every manipulation. For the first time, he didn't defend her. His face turned pale. He whispered, "She's trying to take the baby." I didn't need to answer. The truth was sitting in the room with us. Blake called her immediately. She answered sweetly, but when he confronted her, she switched into her real voice, the one she hid from everyone else. She insisted she was only worried. She insisted he'd told her I was unstable. Blake hung up without another word. She didn't call back. She didn't text. The silence stretched long into the night. Then the next day, Blake went to check the mail and came back holding an envelope from his mother. Inside, neatly written in blue ink, was a single sentence. "All you had to do was name her after me. Enjoy these last weeks together." My hands shook so hard Blake had to take the note from me. Diane wasn't just threatening me anymore. She was promising something. Rehook. And I didn't know it yet, but the next confrontation would happen in the one place she was never supposed to reach, the delivery room. The day I went into labor began, so quietly that it almost fooled me into thinking everything would be normal. My water broke while I was standing in the kitchen making toast, staring out the window at the calm morning. For a moment, I didn't move. I just watched the puddle form on the tile and thought, this is it. Blake rushed me to the hospital, gripping the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles went white. When we arrived, he insisted on speaking to the staff before I did. His voice was firm, tense in a way I'd never heard before. "My mother is not allowed anywhere near my wife. Her name is Diane. Do not let her in. Don't give her information. Call security if she shows up." The nurse nodded, startled by his intensity, and made a note in my chart. Blake squeezed my hand once we were alone. "She's not getting anywhere near you or Rose." I needed to hear him say that. For the first time in months, he chose me without hesitation. Labor progressed slowly at first, then all at once, the contractions growing sharper and closer together. Hours passed in waves of pain, each one stealing my breath. Blake stayed by my side the entire time, letting me squeeze his hand until my grip left red marks across his skin. He never complained. He just kept telling me I was doing amazing, that Rose was almost here, that we were so close. Then, somewhere down the hall, a voice started yelling. At first, I couldn't make out the words over the contraction ripping through me, but the pitch and rhythm of that voice cut through everything. Diane. Even in labor, fear shot through my spine. Blake's head snapped toward the door. His whole body went stiff. "No. Not here. Not now." The shouting grew louder, echoing down the hallway. I heard her screaming about her rights, about how she demanded to see her grandchild, insisting she was being kept away by that woman. Blake flew out of the room before I could grab his arm. Another contraction hit, forcing me to clutch the bed rails and focus on breathing. Nurses rushed past my door, glancing back toward the noise. I heard Blake's voice now, low, angry, clashing with Diane's frantic shrieks. "You need to leave." "Blake, honey, I'm just worried about the baby. You know she's not stable. You told me yourself." I said, "Leave. I'm your mother. I have every right to be here when my grandbaby is born. You have no rights. None. You lost them the day you pushed my pregnant wife down the stairs. I didn't push her. She fell. Why won't anyone believe me? I've done nothing but love this family. You threatened to call CPS on her. You called her doctor. Her job. You left that note. You're not protecting anything. You're stalking her." Diane wailed loud enough that I heard it even through the contraction, threatening to split me in half. "I gave up my whole life for you. And this is how you repay me? By choosing her over your own mother?" "Yes," Blake yelled. "I'm choosing her. I'm choosing my wife and my daughter. If you don't leave this hospital right now, I will call the police myself." A nurse hurried into my room, her face tight with anxiety. "Your husband is handling it," she said gently. "But Diane is demanding a social worker. She's telling people you've threatened to hurt yourself." I actually laughed, half delirious, half furious, even as another contraction built. "Of course she is." 20 minutes later, a woman in a blazer entered the room, introducing herself as a social worker. She had the expression of someone who'd already heard multiple versions of the same story and was trying to find the truth buried beneath the noise. She explained that she needed to do a wellness check due to reports of possible self-harm and emotional instability. Someone had said I had a history of mental illness, and that Blake was afraid to speak up. Right on cue, Blake rushed back into the room, his face flushed with anger. "That someone is my mother, and she's lying. Every word she told you is a lie. She's been stalking us for months." The social worker turned to me. "Is this true?" "Yes. Check my medical records. Check the password on my file. Check the notes from my OB. It's all documented. I put protections in place because Diane kept calling pretending to be family." The nurse backed me up without hesitation. She's been calm and cooperative. No instability. The only disruptive person we've dealt with today is the woman screaming in the waiting room. As if on cue, the shouting intensified. Diane screeched something about being treated like a criminal. Security arrived. A guard's firm voice echoed down the hall. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Don't touch me. You people don't understand. That is my grandbaby. She's poisoned all of you against me. She's manipulating you." I heard a scuffle, followed by Diane's frantic, unhinged screaming. Blake, don't do this. I'm your mother. I'm your mother." Her voice cracked into something raw and desperate. "She's going to destroy you. She's going to take that baby away. I'm trying to save you." The shouting grew fainter as security dragged her down the hallway. Still she screamed, promising lawyers, threatening lawsuits, swearing she'd come back. "This isn't over. Do you hear me? This isn't over." The moment her voice finally disappeared, the room felt eerily quiet. Blake came to my side, tears in his eyes. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't have words for him. A contraction stole them before I could try. The next moments blurred into pure instinct. The nurse checked me and said it was time to push. Everything happened fast. Pain surged through every inch of me as my body took over. I screamed. I cried. I focused on Blake's voice telling me I was doing it, that Rose was almost here, that she was coming into a world where we would protect her no matter what. At 12:01 a.m., Rose entered the world, her small cry filling the room with a sound so pure it erased everything else. They placed her on my chest. Warm. Tiny. Perfect. Blake sobbed. I sobbed. For a moment, there was no Diane, no threats, no fear, just the three of us, our own small universe. But the peace wouldn't last. Diane had been dragged out of the hospital, but she hadn't let go. She never let go. Rehook. And while I held my daughter for the very first time, I didn't yet realize that Diane's final plan was already in motion, and it wasn't over. The first 24 hours after Rose's birth were a blur of exhaustion and awe. Nurses came in and out, checking vitals, helping me sit up, showing me how to swaddle this impossibly tiny human who felt like pure magic in my arms. Blake never left my side. He held Rose with a gentleness that made my chest ache. For the first time in months, I felt safe, truly safe. Diane was gone. Security had escorted her out. And even though her parting screams still echoed in my memory, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, finally, her grip on us was broken. I should have known better. Diane didn't break. She regrouped. She didn't retreat. She recalculated. And she had spent years perfecting the art of pretending to be the injured party. I just didn't realize how fast she'd move. The morning after Rose was born, a nurse entered the room looking uneasy. She asked to speak with Blake in the hallway. I sat in the bed holding Rose, watching him follow her out with worry wrinkling his forehead. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My stomach twisted. When Blake finally came back, he shut the door behind him and leaned against it like someone had knocked the wind out of him. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at Rose, then at me. "My mother filed a complaint." My entire body tightened. "At the hospital?" "No. With CPS." The words hit like ice water down my spine. Blake ran a hand over his face. "She told them you're unstable, that you threatened to harm yourself, that you're mentally unfit. She said she feared for the baby's safety." I felt the room tilt. I clutched Rose closer, terrified someone might take her from my arms right that second. The anger that followed came fast and hot. She did it. She actually did it. Blake came to sit beside me, his expression pained. "They're sending someone to talk to us. Today." My breath caught. Today. But the nurse said Diane probably made the call before they dragged her out of the hospital. I couldn't believe the speed of it. She had planned this. Every manipulative phone call. Every lie. Every exaggerated, tearful conversation with relatives. Even the dramatic scene at the hospital. It was all groundwork. Blake reached for my hand. "We'll get through this. We'll tell them everything. And your doctor has documentation. They'll see what she's doing." I nodded, but fear had settled deep in my bones. CPS wasn't something that could be ignored. It was something that could destroy families. And Diane understood that. The social worker arrived that afternoon, a woman named Carla with calm eyes and a notebook she kept close. She introduced herself, then asked if she could speak with us privately in the room. I held Rose as I answered questions about my mental health, my pregnancy, my support system, my relationship with Diane. Blake explained the entire story, from the staircase incident to the note she left, to the call she made to my doctor and job. Carla took notes quietly, occasionally asking follow-up questions. Did I have a history of depression? No. Had I ever threatened self-harm? Never. Did I have a support system? Yes, Blake, my sister, my family. Carla asked if she could speak to my doctor as well. When my OB confirmed everything, the password on my file, the multiple suspicious calls, the concerns about impersonation, Carla's demeanor shifted. She softened. She thanked us for speaking openly and assured us that Rose could stay with us without any restrictions. As she left, she added carefully, if anything else happens, document it. People who file false reports rarely stop after one attempt. Her warning chilled me. And she was right. Diane always resurfaced. Always. When we brought Rose home 2 days later, the house felt peaceful, almost like breathing out after holding tension too long. My sister Val had decorated the living room with balloons and tiny pink banners. She hugged me tightly, kissed Rose's forehead, and whispered she's perfect. Blake seemed lighter too, though shadows of guilt lingered in his eyes. He had grown up believing his mother's love was the purest thing in his life. Now he was seeing how twisted that love really was. A few quiet days passed. We settled into a rhythm. Night feedings, diaper changes, naps that never lasted long enough. I began to relax, though I never left a window uncovered or the door unlocked. Then, 3 days after we came home, the doorbell rang. My heart lurched. Blake checked the peephole. It's not her, he said immediately. It's a delivery driver. I exhaled, but when Blake opened the door, there was no package. Only an envelope lying on the welcome mat. My stomach dropped. Blake picked it up with 2 fingers, as if touching it might burn him. There was no address, no stamp, just our names written on the front in looping handwriting I recognized instantly. Diane had been here, while we were home. While Rose slept in her bassinet, Blake opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I could only see the first line before my vision blurred with rage. You think you've won. You haven't. Blake read the rest quietly, his jaw tightening with every sentence. She accused me of manipulating him. Said I had turned him against his own blood. Said Rose deserved a grandmother who truly loved her. Then at the bottom, she wrote, a mother never loses her child, and a grandmother never stops fighting. I felt sick. Blake shredded the letter immediately and threw it in the trash, then locked every door and window in the house. We didn't sleep that night. We sat up together, watching Rose breathe softly in her bassinet. The next morning, Blake filed a restraining order. Diane fought it, of course, crying in court, claiming she was being punished for loving her family too much. But the hospital records, the CPS complaint, the documented calls to my doctor, and the note were enough for the judge to grant a full order. Diane was banned from contacting us in any form. She was banned from approaching our home. She was banned from seeing Rose. The look on her face when the judge announced the decision was something I'll never forget. Astonishment, rage, disbelief that her tactics had finally failed. She looked at Blake with betrayal. So deep it bordered on hatred. This isn't over, she mouthed. But for us it was. For the first time since the pregnancy began, I felt the weight lift off my chest. Diane no longer had the power to touch our lives. Months passed. Rose grew, beautiful, healthy, always smiling. Blake healed slowly, carrying the grief of losing the mother he thought he knew. But he also grew into someone stronger, someone who protected his family fiercely. We built a quiet, safe life together. We never heard from Diane again. Not directly. Occasionally we'd hear through relatives that she still told her own version of a story, painting herself as the victim. But her voice no longer reached us. She no longer had access to our world. I look at Rose now, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her eyes bright with curiosity, and I know that everything we endured was worth it. Because I kept her safe. Because I chose the kind of mother and family I wanted to be. Diane tried to rewrite our story, but in the end, the only story that mattered was the one I protected with everything in me. Rose's story, our family story, and Diane is no longer part of it. Because sometimes family isn't who you come from, it's who you fight for, who you protect, and who you choose to become.